The guidelines for me in terms of layering of sound in a chase scene are if the vehicle sounds that you recorded aren't strong enough to carry the moment, if you don't think it's a gnarly enough pass by or a cool enough downshift to get that ring, then it asks you, the scene asks you to do something to help it out. That being said, what doesn't work and what I don't like, and back to the previous question about what advice do I give my editors about cutting vehicle scenes is, don't layer up multiple vehicle sounds. I don't want to have, a pass-by of a minivan with a pass-by of a Volkswagen Beetle. I mean, at some point, those sounds all start to kind of conflict with each other. I don't want layers and layers of car sounds. I want a clear choice on the sound of the car. It's like the voice of the character when you think about it. I don't want to have multiple voices of the car. I want one. So I want you to pick a series, and that's part of our methodology is you see the scene, you define the vehicle, you find it in the library, you find the good workup that fits that particular vehicle, and then you stick with it until you can't. And you do one of two things. You either sweeten it with the whooshes, and there's like, every now and again I'll use like synthetic sounds, like high frequency things to give revs a little more juice. But I try to use them really selectively so that it's just a brief moment of impact on the audience. If the revs aren't sounding sort of cool enough, I'll sort of suggest that there's other components that we're hearing, as if you had a microphone on a specific component in the engine compartment. So you can take the rev and use that as an envelope generator and a pitch generator in a plug-in to generate other sounds that map the envelope of the sound you use. The actual rev of that actual engine is then going to trigger another device to create an overlay in its image. So at least it feels like it's organic to the vehicle, even though you didn't actually record it when that thing was done. In this film that I'm working on, the protagonist steals a modern Dodge Challenger, a super hot engine with a really cool sounding exhaust note. But the scene itself is two people talking, and it's more about the information than it is the sound of the car. So in that particular scene, the interior recordings I got of that Dodge Challenger have too much of an exhaust note in it, and it's very, very tonal, in fact. And so I filtered as much of that out as I could, and I actually supplemented it with some interior cabin recordings of like a minivan, like a really boring, family car, because I didn't want to be distracting from the dialogue with all this other stuff going on. Again, back to this idea of putting microphones in the engine compartment. I certainly didn't want to hear all that clatter coming from the engine compartment. It's a scene about two people talking to each other. So you should be making these very simple aesthetic choices when you build up a scene. Inversely, a chase sequence. You want to get the audiences kind of, you want to get the blood going. You want to get the excitement level charged up. So sometimes it's okay to play a little fast and loose with the car sounds. Even if the car's going by at 30 miles an hour, maybe you play at 60 miles an hour, so because you want it to just sound a little bit faster than it really is. You want the pass-bys of the car to always cross into the cabin. There's more excitement when you want that tail away to cross into the cabin. There's a whole fine art to how you dovetail, a good vehicle sequence, if it's a chase or a race sequence, you're cutting from interiors to exteriors, and there's a quick pass by, then you cut into the cockpit and the guy's driving along and he's shifting, and then you cut to the exterior. It's a really complex set of things you need to do to get all those sounds to dovetail. Probably one of the things that you shouldn't do, unless it's an aesthetic you've established, is cut hard, like really hard cuts, like right on the frame. You always want a little bit of dovetailing. Along with that, you want to be very sensitive to RPM matching. If the interior shot, the individual is doing a downshift and revs up to 5,600 RPM, you want the exterior shot to come as close to matching that, so you have a proper fluid segue from interior to exterior. Those are important things to do. I'll usually goose up a pass-by with some kind of wind whoosh or something just to sort of make it feel bigger. Just like we make gunshots bigger than they really are by putting explosions and other crazy untoward sounds behind them. It's fun to sort of jack up chase scenes with things that aren't actual car sounds, just to give them excitement. That's a big part of the sort of the chase scene. There are too many tire screeches. I'm preaching to the choir in this discussion because any sound artist worth their salt would never put an asphalt skid on a shot of a vehicle skidding in the dirt or gravel. And, there's these sort of three major food groups. There's asphalt, dirt, and gravel. That's kind of the holy trinity of things that you can skid on. And yet, I'm sensitive to it. I remember even as a kid, long before I became, I got into the movie business, watching Magnum P.I. and thinking, wait a minute, and Dukes of Hazzard, they're driving around, in the backyard. Why do I hear, I know what that skid sound is. And there's really an elegance and a fine art to doing a great edit on skids in a chase scene, because there's a lot of expression that tires can have in that process. And we've done skid sessions just to capture the sounds of cars, drifting around corners, coming in and stopping hard and, locking up the brakes, that kind of thing, or the peel outs or the standers. There's so many different names for this. You peeling out from a start where either you spin the tires or there's a nice chirp and you pull away. There's so much expression in a vehicle. It almost takes on this kind of character when it comes to the sounds of tires and chirps and skids. And I love playing around with that stuff. Now, that being said, we've got to stop putting that dumb dog bark sound whenever a plane lands. You see the stock shot, the arr, arr. We've got to stop that. We've got to put our foot down. And when the filmmakers ask for it, we have to say, sorry, that's against the rules. I'm pulled out of movies a lot because of the bad use of sound in vehicles, because, first of all, I'm a purist. I know the difference between a V12 and a V8 and a straight 6 and a V6 and a V4 or a pancake 4. I'm a car nut, and I used to own a lot of sports cars, and I used to like to tinker. And so I hear the differences. And again, back to that suspension of disbelief thing, though I don't think you need to be a car nut, but I think if we're in the Herbie the Love Bug movie, and that's a flat 4 air-cooled pancake engine from Volkswagen, most people know that sound without having to intellectualize it, but if the sound person put in the sound of a V6 Chevy, you wouldn't really think about it, but subconsciously you'd be thinking, something's not right, I'm put off. Just like another example of that sort of subconscious thing that's going on, audiences know when ADR isn't working well, because they know they brought the actor into a studio and he redid the lines, and the lips aren't syncing up right and the voice doesn't match the face. So too with vehicle recordings. I think you subconsciously, even if you don't know cars at all, something just doesn't feel right in a scene. So I hear it and I know, he cheated a Maserati for a Lamborghini because he couldn't get the Countach. So, but I'm a freak. I hear those dumb little nuances that the movie-going public may not, but I think for the purposes of this talk about vehicle recordings, the people that are watching this are sound freaks. If you're thinking about the vehicle library from Pro Sound Effects, you're here because you're a freak and you, like me, and you want great sound, and you're going to be a nut for verisimilitude. You're going to try to match the vehicle as best you can. And so that's part of the game that we all play with libraries. No, I didn't record a 1985 Dodge a Rambler. Did Dodge make a Rambler, or was that GM? Oh, I'm going to get my cars wrong. But I happen to know that the 95 and the 96 had the same inline 6-cylinder engine. I'm happy with making that substitution because functionally speaking, there's no difference in the sound. So when you get to be good with cars, and when you get to be good with sound, you learn to be able to make the proper substitutions that you're allowed to make. I know an 84 308 GT is no different from an 87 308 GT. So I can substitute that sound without having to be a freak for having to get the actual year, make, and model. There's a lot of shorthand you can use to achieve success with a broad library like this and cover a lot of vehicle needs.